Good morning, and thank you for being with us today to recognize and close out the Mature Worker Action Team project. My name is Nicole Bourgeois, and I'm the project coordinator for the Mature Worker Action Team, and I'll be your host and moderator for this morning's session. It is wonderful to have you all here with us today. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that we're living and working on traditional territories in Alberta of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, in whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries, including the peoples of Treaty 7. This morning's session will be filled with acknowledgements, job seeker and employer information, an opportunity to network, and of course, an opportunity to win some prizes. So let's get started. Let's talk about how the project came to be. The Mature Worker Action Team was brought together initially by a senior with a vision of organizations and individuals working collaboratively to develop innovative programming to keep older individuals working when they wanted to or if they needed to. The team is comprised of members from the Kirby Centre, MCG Career Incorporated, and the Talent Pool, with participating partners and supports by Charter Professionals in Human Resources Alberta, Calgary Catholic Immigration Society, and WCG Services. The Mature Worker Action Team is supported by representatives from the City of Calgary Age-Friendly Strategies and is funded by Alberta Ministry of Labour and the Alberta Ministry of Community and Social Services. The member organizations perceived that there was a lack of community supports directly targeted to an aging workforce and services currently available for youth, persons with disabilities, or immigrants that are not always appropriate for older people. Through research grants, the Mature Worker Action Team has been able to define the mature worker as an individual aged 50 years or older, and the research also identified a rise in the number of mature workers unemployed due to layoffs in the Calgary market and have been unable to find new employment in their current field or who are unable to transition their experiences into new employment. The research had also shown challenges for mature workers re-entering or maintaining employment, in particular those with less than post-secondary or high school education or recent training have experienced the greatest challenges to transition within their current employment or to find their new employment. Many of these workers were unable to keep up with the knowledge curve and or learning new skills to continue being competitive in the labor market. As we moved forward and started the project in March of 2019, we carried on more research in the development of the project streams through employer focus groups and surveys that included multiple industries participating, such as the grocery and retail, healthcare, senior care, construction, staffing agencies, and hospitality. The objectives of the project were to support the provision of ongoing education, coaching, and access to resources to support older adults seeking employment, including self-employment, promote the higher value of hiring and retaining of older workers, and educate employers regarding age-friendly workplaces. Therefore, the project goal for the job seeker stream, Ready to Get Ready, was to provide the short-term support, information, and coaching for job seekers who are 50 years of age or older who are struggling to navigate a job search in today's very competitive market. To meet that goal, we developed and delivered a 3-day workshop for job seekers that included emotional intelligence, job skills, job search tactics and planning, resume and cover letter writing, networking, strengths and barrier analysis, and interview skills. Throughout the job seeker sessions, we received feedback and suggestions from the participants that we used to continually improve the sessions as we went along. The goal for the employer stream, Calgary Engage at Any Age, was to communicate, educate, and connect with employers, thus increasing employment opportunities and acquiring knowledge, putting workers back into the labor market. To meet this goal, we developed a 3-hour workshop delivered to employers that included recruitment, biases, skills recognition, recruitment tactics, and mentoring. Employers also received an age-friendly workplace assessment and employer toolkit to help to utilize within their organizations. The ultimate purpose of the project was to create a template for a more permanent solution to older worker unemployment services. The project delivered 6 participant cohort sessions, with 40 participants completing the full 3-day participant session. 10 of those participants have found employment. 5 of those participants had ceased their job search after the sessions due to family or their own health issues. Since COVID-19, an additional 8 participants ceased their job search. 4 participants decided they no longer wanted to work, or they were eligible for their retirement benefits and sought those benefits. 2 participants have also pursued entrepreneurial businesses and have started their own. And 11 participants from the 40 continue to look for employment with resources and referrals to other services given. We also delivered 2 employer sessions to 30+ employers and HR professionals. The employer session obtained CPD credit approval for the Charter Professionals and Human Resources designated professionals. We participated in the City of Calgary age-friendly strategy sessions, and an article was published in the HR Reporter, a national publication, about the project, which was written by Chartered Professionals of Human Resources Alberta about. We were also invited to participate in an employment roundtable discussion on generations in the workplace with SAIT and faculty and students. And on a very, very cold and snowy November 2019 morning, we hosted our keystone event, Age-Friendly Inclusion, the Who, Why, and How in the Workplace. This was with Maddie Ditchwald from AgeWave and another guest speaker, Shelley Billingshurst, President of Higher Value. The project will be completed by the end of this year, 2020, with final report being submitted for January 2021. I want to thank you all to the employers who participated in the focus groups, surveys, and sessions, where your participation and feedback was instrumental to the development and continual improvements of the offered sessions, employer and participant. I want to bring particular attention to Vitality at Home, PCL Construction, and Sobe Safeway, who contributed throughout the project through hiring directly and indirectly, and being an open contributor to the project through their feedback and shared practices. Thank you for being a part of the project. I also want to thank all the participants who attended the sessions, sharing their experiences, being vulnerable, and giving feedback to continually improve the delivery of the 3-day sessions and making them what they were today. We wish all of you continued success. In addition, I'd also like to take this time to thank the community who referred participants to us for the project: the Kirby Centre, Service Canada, Bow Valley College, MCG Careers Incorporated, and Alberta Works. As the project does come to a close, there are supports out there for mature seekers and employers. Options 45, a voluntary drop-in program run through the Kirby Centre that brings in employers and service providers to talk about job search, labor market, is all in support and intent to getting mature workers back into the workforce. Throughout the project, participants were strongly encouraged to attend these weekly sessions for networking, additional job search strategies, and to maintain an active job search. This program that was run in person is now transitioned into a virtual platform with greater attendance numbers. We encourage those who are interested in this program, job seekers or employers, to please contact Kirby Centre Information Resources Department and see how you can participate or be involved. Another service that we hope other job seekers and employers will look into is the Targeted Initiative for Mature Workers with the MCG Career Incorporated. The Targeted Initiative for Mature Workers program consists of 6 weeks of classroom workshops, 6 weeks of supported job search, and a 90-day employment follow-up. The skill development workshops focus on personal development, career development, computer training, and job search strategies. This program is for unemployed or underemployed Albertans legally entitled to work in Canada who are between 50 and 64 years of age. They are currently offering this program virtually with continuous intakes and new groups starting every 8 weeks. Before we move on to our presentation and panel discussion this morning, I want to make sure I send out some thank yous on behalf of the project, the Mature Worker Action Team, and myself. I want to thank our partners and supporters, the Kirby Centre, the Talent Pool, MCG Careers, WCG Services, Calgary Catholic Immigration Society, Charter Professionals in Human Resources, and of course, our partners who supported the project through volunteers, in-kind donations, facilitators, articles, advertising, and marketing. I also want to shout out a quick thank you to Margaret McCahey, our learner developer, who put together the program materials and facilitated some of our participant sessions. We couldn't do this project without our volunteers. And so I want to thank our facilitator volunteers, Vinita Kapoor from Kirby Centre, Deborah Chabot from WCG Services, and Hasmik Amarian and Annetta Popa from Calgary Catholic Immigration Society. I want to thank those who contributed with marketing support, the Kirby Centre, Talent Pool, and CPHR Alberta. I want to thank our session speakers and resources, Mark Kalinowski from Credit Counseling Society and Amanda Mori from Money Mentors. I also want to thank our event support and speakers, Shelley Billinghurst, Angela Champ, Pat Hufnagel-Smith, Cheryl Knight, and Nicole Dyer. And I want to thank all of those who participated, job seekers, in the research grants that we had to get us to where we are today, as well as our employer focus group participants and our facilitator, Katie Thompson. Of course, I need to thank our Mature Worker Action Team Committee. I want to thank Chris Thomas from the Talent Pool, Lynn Podgurney from the Kirby Centre, Karen Olenek from MCG Careers, and Eva Chan from the City of Calgary Age-Friendly Strategies. Thank you all for being a guiding voice throughout this project. And I, of course, want to thank our funders, the Government of Alberta Community of Social Services and the Ministry of Labour. As we move forward, there was one piece of feedback that we heard from both the job seeker and the employers who attended the sessions, and it was that there was not enough information or guidance on identifying and translating transferable skills, where the transferable skills can be applied, and how to communicate them. Throughout the project, we were unable to find a comprehensive roadmap, if you will, for employers and job seekers to define and identify transitional skills and experience until now. We're going to transition into our talent strategies and transitioning economy presentation. So just going to quickly do some introductions here. We're moving into the talent strategies in a transitioning economy, presented by Cheryl Knight and Pat Hufnagel-Smith. Cheryl Knight is the founding executive director and CEO of the Petroleum Human Services Resource Council of Canada, now Petro LMI. And since 2013, she's become one of Canada's recognized oil and gas workforce issue experts and labor market intelligence. She is a recognized expert in the understanding trends and influences on Canada's labor market and has been a featured speaker at multiple human resource and technical conferences. Welcome, Cheryl. And with Cheryl, we have Pat Hufnagel-Smith, who has over 20 years of experience providing analysis and insights into the dynamics of Canada's labor market, emerging trends, and occupations. And short, medium, and long-term workforce requirements information talent strategy. She's been working in the field of labor market adjustment since 1992 and was instrumental in the development of the cross-sector occupational methodology used by Petro LMI and others for assessing the transferability and suitability of talent across industries. Together, Cheryl and Pat have partnered to provide clients innovative and practical workforce strategies to address business challenges and shifting workforce requirements under the banner Talent Needs for the Evolving Energy Ecosystem. Pat, Cheryl, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. I'm going to kick things off while Cheryl gets our presentation up. But yes, we certainly appreciate this opportunity to share with you some of our insights into our approach to optimizing talent in a transitioning economy with a particular focus on hiring mature oil and gas workers. This presentation is based on our research and application of a transferability model that we've developed to help facilitate that sector-to-sector transition and also support companies that are needing to look outside of their industry in order to address their hiring needs. We'd like to thank our partner, Chris Thomas from Talent Pool, for referring us to this session. And this session wouldn't be possible without funding from the Alberta government, as it's part of our Alberta Transitioning Economy project, focused on developing information, tools, and resources to assist the transferability of oil and gas workers in our transitioning economy. Alberta's businesses and workforces have experienced an unprecedented disruption due to an economy that's really been in transition since 2014 and now due to COVID. I mean, I think there's no industry sector that has been untouched by either of those events, the downturn in the oil and gas industry or by COVID. It's not necessarily all bad, as some industries have actually seen an increase in business. But we do know that this has driven structural shifts that have occurred, in markets, supply, demand, how you reach out to your customers, the supply chains, regulatory environments have shifted. How we work and the overall use of technology has all been a result of what we've been experiencing since 2014 and beyond. These structural shifts impacts the occupational and skill requirements. Our perspective is that Alberta's economy is going to be in transition for some time. And we believe that those that build a strategy to optimize the labor market that is also in transition will be ahead of the game. The talent strategy incorporates transitioning workers is an imperative, both from a province perspective as well as from a company perspective. We know from a provincial perspective that an optimized labor market is critical to provincial transformation, diversification, and prosperity. We know that we're challenged economically because underemployed or unemployed workers simply do not contribute to economically at the same level they were as when they were fully employed. And we need to start thinking about preventing brain drain. As the chart on this slide demonstrates, for the first time in decades, Alberta has lost more residents to other provinces than it gained. And so although we don't have detailed information about who's leaving, it certainly is an indicator that we have to pay attention of what kind of skills and expertise are we losing outside of the province. So our work has been helping to inform the province, job seekers, career transitioners, trainers, as well as career and employment agencies on how to better prep for shifting skill requirements associated with a transitioning economy. But at the end of the day, we need companies to hire from this talent pool. And so what's the value to companies to consider hiring from the talent pool of career transitioners and mature workers in particular? First and foremost, it mitigates the risk of escalating talent costs. If we all wait to start hiring for certain in-demand occupations as we need them, it's going to escalate wages. And we know even now there's certain certain skill sets that are hard to find. And we're seeing that shift to where some of those people are, it's very much an employee market, and the wage costs are certainly escalating. This opportunity, looking at what's the value of the local transitioning worker, helps address costs that could be associated with relocating workers elsewhere. And we've actually seen some research that indicates that upskilling a local labor market does offer a return on investment to the tune of almost $2 in revenue for every dollar saved for each dollar that's invested in upskilling. We know that there's opportunity to leverage experience and best practices from other sectors. So if there's an understanding of what kinds of skills and strengths may be coming from other sectors that would benefit your sector or your company, and with a plan in place to get those workers up to speed quickly, it can offer value to your company. And finally, there's an opportunity to align with broader ESG goals. Diversity and inclusion needs to include the mature worker. And we know that ageism tends to be one of those isms that's less acknowledged, but certainly has become a key concern in this latest downturn and COVID situation. So when the business environment improves and hiring kicks in again, we know it's going to fall to human resources professionals to help guide business leaders. And so with that in mind, we'd like to share with you a high-level overview of our approach to assessing the transferability and the opportunity to hire talent from other sectors. To be effective, you have to effectively assess transferability, we do need an understanding of both what are the skills required in the near term and longer term. You know, we're doing this work for the province, but it needs to be replicated at a company level. And then also an understanding of both internal and external talent opportunities. We're not going to spend time on the demand side today, other than to say, again, that that's an evaluation that you'll need to do within your company, is to understand what are those near-term or future skill requirements. Rather, we want to spend our time understanding the labor supply that's available and what that external talent pool may offer you. This is a challenging undertaking. There certainly are high expectations across all business units, including HR and the recruitment function, to engage in evidence or data-based decision making. And the challenge is, when it comes to who are those external talent that may be available to your company, the publicly available data on talent just does not tell the complete story. And so we face this challenge as well in terms of doing our work to understand what's the transferability associated with the oil and gas worker that had been disrupted due to the downturn. And so we undertook a survey called Untapped Talent. And though, while it's not statistically representative of all unemployed or underemployed workers, it does offer us some insights into trends that are not available elsewhere. And so I just want to share with you a little bit about what we've learned about Alberta's mature worker. Again, this mostly focuses on those that have oil and gas experience, but it's based on a survey of so far 1,100 Albertans. This survey is ongoing, of which 35% of them are 55 years and older, and another 30% that are between the ages of 45 and 54. What we found is 63 of the mature worker respondents are looking for work, and another 18% are self-employed or in contractor roles, which could be maybe more precarious than other kinds of employment situations. If you can move on, Cheryl, please. Great, thanks. So what we know about Alberta's mature oil and gas talent is that it's highly educated. Over 85% have obtained a post-secondary education. And this slide shows a breakdown of what that educational attainment looks like. 95% of the mature oil and gas talent have over 15 years experience across a variety of industries. In fact, most have worked in 2 or 3 industries over their careers thus far. And so they've already demonstrated the ability to adapt and transition between industries. Our own research indicates that the oil and gas industry has developed a number of strengths and skills and areas of expertise that, while we can't say every individual from this talent pool has these skill sets, we know there's a great number of them that have worked across these knowledge areas. So whether it be technical or needing to navigate a very strict regulatory environment, engaging with stakeholders, customers, including the very important engagement with Indigenous communities, the ability to assess risk, manage and execute complex projects, working in cross-functional teams, and of course operating within a highly safety-sensitive environment. We're seeing that emerging sectors in particular are already starting to look at how they can leverage this expertise, as they know these are skills and areas of expertise that they're going to need to incorporate into their companies. And so as you think about this potential workforce, you could ask yourself how some of these skills might benefit your company, especially if you're looking to transition and needing to bring some of these skill sets in. And what might be the mentoring opportunity to bring in a mature worker with these with the skills and expertise that and mentor some of your existing workforce. We also want to touch on the fact that there are potential concerns associated with hiring unemployed or underemployed oil and gas workers. And we know, and what we're here to say is that the oil and gas industry has been transitioning for a long, long time. COVID has only added to the need to undergo structural shifts. It's looking at, its market conditions have shifted significantly as supply outpaces demand. The customer base that we are used to, the industry has been used to servicing, is shifting need to look for new customers. There's just a number of things that are impacting this industry that basically means that this downturn is unlike any other downturn the oil and gas industry has experienced. And so where we used to peaks and valley in the sector where activity levels would recover, as would employment opportunities, and oil and gas workers or oil and gas companies would once again be scrambling to find people, this is simply not the case this time around. And so the very difficult fact is that the vast majority of oil and gas workers that were disrupted by this downturn and COVID are not going back to work in the industry in the same way again, if at all. And therefore, some of the concerns that some of you might have related to oil and gas, hiring oil and gas workers that are just going to go back to the industry once activity levels return are unfounded, because the industry simply isn't operating as it did pre-2014. We also know that mature workers, mature oil and gas workers, willingness to transition is also shifting. They're recognizing the need to transition. Cheryl, if you could advance the slide, thank you. So we know from our survey that mature workers, there's an increased willingness to transition to different sectors. There's an increased willingness to train, and we're seeing a training ecosystem that is evolving to meet their needs. So whether that be shorter term micro-credentialing, leveraging the skills that they currently have and adding to it, we're seeing that a number of trainers are evolving to meet the needs of this talent pool. They're more increasingly willing to take a reduction in salary, and we know that mature workers are interested in staying where they're located. So less likely to want to move for a career development or a better opportunity. We are, we don't have our heads in the sand, and so many of the unemployed oil and gas workers have been unemployed for a long period of time, and so it certainly is fair to ask what they've been doing while they've been away from work. Understand what are they doing to demonstrate their willingness to transition. On this note, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl, and she's going to provide you an overview of the methodologies that we use to assess the opportunity the mature oil and gas worker and other untapped pools of talent offers.
Thank you, Pat. So what I'd like to highlight first is this information is on a website, and the web link will be at the end of the presentation, but it's www.careertransitions.ca. And within that website, you'll find the Energy Career Transition and Employment Resource. So what I would like to do is tell you about our transferability methodology on two levels. Firstly, the sectoral level, and then secondly, the occupational level. So I'm going to give you an overview of the methodology, which you can think about from the perspective of the Alberta economy, but also at a company level. So we know as companies change, you're thinking about the transferability or the transition of your staff within your company to respond to the changing environment. So this should give you insights into fit. So fit for a candidate and any gaps that you may need to address to ensure recruitment or retention success. So our sector-to-sector methodology uses three criteria: technical transferability, nature of work transferability, and value proposition transferability. So what I'd like you to do is put on your workforce planning hat, because these criteria are applicable for both internal transition and external transition, and assessing the transferability of both talent pools. Our focus for this session is external and the available mature worker talent pool. So the criteria. So when you think about transferability or transition, most people think about technical transferability, which is the core skills, qualifications, certifications, technical knowledge, knowledge of equipment, the business environment, the regulatory environment, and so on. But what is almost as important, if not more important for retention, are nature of work transferability and value proposition transferability. So how will an individual fit from one work environment to your work environment, assessing work arrangements, workplace culture, the types of relationships they will have and how people interact and so on, and the value proposition being offered by the new company. That, of course, is the compensation, but it's also the location of the work, the career development opportunities afforded by the company, and even the value it represents. So on that website, we have assessed the transferability from oil and gas to 9 sectors in Alberta's economy, and that each sector is assessed as having high, medium, or low transferability. So we invite you to look at that when you have time later. But to bring it back to what we've learned about Alberta's untapped talent pool, and especially the oil and gas talent pool, is the oil and gas unemployed worker is technically extremely well suited to transition to Alberta's economy, especially where sectors are adjacent or most close to oil and gas. So those of you that hire these workers will benefit from the strengths that the oil and gas industry has developed in the workers that Pat highlighted earlier. We acknowledge that some level of technical upskilling is likely required around those technical transferability areas, technical regulations, equipment, and so on, and that you will want to assess workers transitioning into your sector based on nature of work transferability as well as value proposition. So when you look at occupation to occupation transferability, we assess the pathway for an individual based on their current occupation and based on their preferences or their ability to transition. So we look at it in 3 ways. So a transition pathway could be direct. It could require a refocus or a reboot. So a direct transition is when somebody is transitioning to you or an occupation in your sector because they have the same or essentially the same qualifications, certifications, technical skills, and so on, that technical transferability. If the candidate requires a refocus, then their certifications, skills, knowledge is very similar, but they will likely require some skill or knowledge upgrading to increase the likelihood that you'll recruit them. So many of them are trying to get that in advance and to ensure that they will be retained. And lastly, a candidate who is committed to a reboot is very flexible and very committed to requalify themselves with respect to their skills and technical knowledge and to qualify for a position. And those candidates are often willing to be flexible to relocate, take reduced salaries, and so on. So when we compare mature workers to other talent pools that you may be looking at when you're hiring, such as new grads or even experienced workers from your own industries, we acknowledge that there are benefits and drawbacks to hiring a mature worker or a mature worker from oil and gas. They may need to upskill for your organization and for a changing environment. But we believe that they know that and they're preparing for that. And that this is an opportunity for you to have an experienced worker from another industry who brings skills, very extensive skills with them. As well, the training ecosystem has evolved, and many trainers are providing short-term training to help workers to develop micro-credentials. So if you're a recruiter, we know that there is a challenge marketing candidates to a hiring manager. And what I'm hoping and what I expect to see is that the expert panel that follows this will identify very clearly that value proposition that you can use to work with the hiring manager. Pat and I will discuss this more fully at the CPHR Alberta Online PD event on December the 8th. So for more extensive explanation of the resources on careertransitions.ca, please join us at the event. So if you have questions or follow-up comments, please connect with us on LinkedIn on the link that you see here, or our personal LinkedIn accounts at Pat Hufnagel-Smith or Cheryl Knight, or of course, look for this information on careertransitions.ca. Thank you very much, and I'll turn you back to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Pat and Cheryl. I can't tell you, the research and your findings with transitional skills and how to translate those, I think is going to be a game changer, both for job seekers and for employers and hiring managers, because sometimes the struggle is just really being able to see what experience can translate into another role or another industry. So thank you for that. And again, I would encourage any of you in attendance today to reach out to Pat and Cheryl via their contact information, and we'll send that out to you within 24 hours of today's session, so that you also will have that at your disposal. It's so true when we think about how our job seekers are changing, especially because of the way our economy is going. And even in this project, although we started off identifying that it was individuals who are likely transitioned out of their roles due to technology or inability or unable to upskill and the like, now we were identifying that we were seeing more people from the energy sector, oil and gas specifically. So this is such a great game changer. So thank you again for being with us today. I do want to mention quickly before we get to our amazing panel discussion that after the panel discussion, we will be going into a networking room where you'll have an opportunity to meet with fellow attendees today. But I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that we'll be transitioning and you'll receive further instructions from there. So throughout this project, I continually saw the contributions that mature workers have to offer workplaces if given the opportunity, along with the challenges the job seeker and employers continually face with our economic landscape. So now I'd like to talk about the value of mature workers, hiring and retaining those workers. With us today to talk about the value of mature workers is Angela Champ, Human Resource Executive, author, and speaker. There she is. Hello, Angela. And we're going to get to know Angela in a minute here. And with us today is Nicole Dyer, co-director and co-founder of Vitality at Home. Welcome, the two of you. So Angela, I'm going to start with you. You have a new book coming out. As I stated, Angela is an author. And it's coming out at the end of November here. Can you tell me a bit about the book and yourself and how that came about and how you believe the content's going to apply for today's discussion?
Great, thank you. Can you hear me or is my mic off?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm coming to you from Surrey, British Columbia. And before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge the shared unceded traditional territory of the Katsi, Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish peoples on which we work, play, and learn. And thank you for having me today. I lived in Alberta for 13 years before, 13 years before moving back to British Columbia. And so a lot of what Pat and Cheryl shared with us today, I was making tons of notes in my notebook, and I was nodding my head a lot with a lot of what they were saying. So thank you for having us. So as you mentioned, I have a book coming out. It's called The Squiggly Line Career. And funnily enough, it touches on a lot of the things that Pat and Cheryl just talked about, which is how do you transfer your skills and your experience across professions and across industries. I myself have worked in insurance, banking, oil and gas, construction, retail, and tourism, among other industries. And I have not always worked as an HR professional. I've worked as an insurance claims adjuster. I've been individual contributor roles. I've been operations, and really have been in human resources for the last 12 years of my career as an HR executive. And I have what's called an accidental career. So what I was able to do was translate the skills and experience that I had in one job or one industry and translate them over to other industries or professions and human resources that I'm working in now. As Cheryl and Pat mentioned, sometimes it was a refocus and sometimes it was a reboot. And so the book that I've written, which is coming out at the end of November, called The Squiggly Line Career, really talks about how you can leverage that when you want to change professions. What are the traits and what are the steps that you need to take in order to do that? The first part is for job seekers, and the second part is for recruiters, human resources, and hiring managers, on how to really recognize somebody who has the traits that you're looking for, even if they don't have the direct experience. And that relates to what we're talking about today, which is mature workers, because sometimes people need to make and pivot into a new profession or a new industry and need to know how to do. You're never too old to have a squiggly line career.
Excellent. Well, thank you and welcome, Angela. We're so pleased to have you here with us today. I next want to bring up Nicole Dyer, who, again, as I said, is the co-founder and president of Vitality at Home. Welcome, Nicole. And Nicole, how are you linked to the Mature Worker Action Team?
So you and I had the opportunity to work together, myself as one of the employers that have onboarded one of the participants in the program. From a career perspective, I've worked in senior housing and in the senior industry for a prolonged period of time. As an industry, it is one that is definitely focusing on hiring mature workers who are transitioning their career paths. So perhaps individuals that never thought of that as a potential end of career direction, but definitely one that we love onboarding individuals that fall into that mature worker category and find great value in their skills, which matched us really well with your program.
Excellent. Well, welcome, Nicole. I do also want to mention that Nicole was a nominee for the 40 Under 40 this year by Avenue Magazine. So her talents and her contribution to the community have been recognized, and not just by us, but by our province and by Avenue Magazine. So welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. So we're going to launch into our panel discussion. There we are. Look at us. I have some questions for our panelists, and what I'm going to do is just identify first and then allow the other panelists to add further comment and what have you moving forward. So Angela, I'm going to start with you really quickly here. Initially, when we did the research for this project to start it, we had noticed that the group we researched with were individuals who were transitioned out, as I mentioned earlier, potentially didn't have the opportunity to upskill or retrain to be able to pivot within their current job or career, and who were potentially not labeled not as professionals. what we were seeing as we were doing intakes in this project, and I think as Cheryl and Pat had also identified, we were seeing more individuals who were from the energy sector, professionals or managers, mid-level from those sectors. Any advice for these job seekers on how to transition themselves? I know we heard from Pat and Cheryl, but let's get some boots on the ground advice. Angela.
Sure, and you will hear some of the same themes that Pat and Cheryl talked about. You know, there's that saying, the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago, and the second best time is today. And so one of the challenges that some mature workers are facing is that because they become experts or really proficient in their current work, they don't take time to stay current and fresh. And then 12 years, 20 years, 30 years later, when they find themselves transitioned out, either because the industry struggling or because the company has downsized or because we have a pandemic and businesses are closing, they've caught themselves unaware because they haven't stayed fresh and current and upskilled. One piece of advice I give a lot of people is do an annual, and this goes for everybody, whether you're job seeking or not, by the way, is pull out your resume once a year, whether that's in December or whatever time you pick, and see what you can add to that resume. Have you taken a new course? Have you upskilled? Have you expanded your role and taken on a new responsibility? And have you achieved a major accomplishment? If you cannot add one new thing to your resume, then you're not staying current and you become at risk of becoming redundant. So, and if you're finding yourself in a situation where you are transitioned out, it becomes that much harder. And so Pat and Cheryl were talking about micro-credentials. I noticed that in the presentation, I think they said compared to earlier in the year, 16% were willing to undertake additional training and certification. Really, that would have said 100%. 16% is too low. And it does not have to mean going back to university and getting a 4-year degree or getting a master's degree. It could be as simple as taking a program through Coursera, coursera.org. Many of you know it. Many other programs are free. For a very modest fee for the same programs, you can get a certification that you can then put on LinkedIn. What that does is it keeps you fresh and current on your skills. And it shows potential employers that you have a growth mindset, that you are willing to learn. I love, Nicole, that you said that your job seeker session included emotional intelligence training. One of the 4 dimensions of emotional intelligence, as many of us know, is self-awareness. And once you can identify for yourself where you're lacking, it's much easier to transition and to agree with that. So, also, if you don't know the basics of some software, I'm talking Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that's like 1980s technology, but you at least know the basics. And if you don't know that, get somebody to show you, take a class in continuing ed, or get some reverse mentoring going with somebody younger, because that's just even price of admission. That's like table stakes. And so we're not asking you to be able to develop apps for your phone, but you should know the basics. And one of the challenges we're going to talk about later about what the barriers are for mature workers is the perception that we're so technologically inept that we don't even know just the table stakes.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. And you make a great point about that master resume and always adding whatever you're doing on it to be that continuous learner. Nicole, I know you have something to add to that.
I think it's interesting. I think the master resume is a great piece of advice for individuals to grow and add to. I find it a very interesting process when going through the recruiting elements with mature workers, that it frequently takes place that master resume is the one that actually is used on their application. And I think that's something for mature workers to really focus on and understand that you want to continuously add to that document, but by no means should that full document be something that's ever presented to any potential employer. So really it's tailoring that down and making sure that the experience that you have is the sole experience that you're displaying to that specific recruiter or to that specific job posting. I think that ties in really well with that skill set. Although it's a dated and antiquated approach, it also is a sad depiction of a lot of individuals miss when it comes to Word usage or Microsoft skills, because the recruiter on the other end may see that as great skill set, but almost perceive that their lack of ability to tailor that document could very well be a lack of skill set just simply in Microsoft Word.
That's a great point. Anything you wanted to add around how to transition or what transition looks like, Nicole, as we were talking earlier?
Well, I think from a transition standpoint, individuals really need to look at what that transition looks like. We've worked with individuals who, are looking to pursue their career and, remain in a senior management role. That obviously takes a very different direction from a recruitment standpoint versus individuals that are looking to transition their skill set into something that maybe gives back a little bit more to the community. As I mentioned, we do a fair amount of recruiting of mature workers. And match them with our potential senior clients that, they themselves have had an amazing career path as well. So we have a gentleman that's working with us right now who is a frontline caregiver for us, who goes out a few times a week and meets with another past engineer who's in his 90s. And the two of them really do feel as though they're both contributing and really making a difference in each other's lives, where that mature worker otherwise was not working prior to joining our team.
Wow. So really creating a sense of community as well, and developing that community is also part of the job seeker and in some areas the employer's responsibility too. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So what are some of the misunderstandings that employers have about mature workers? I think we've touched on a few. Have you found these to be true in your experience? And if not, what have you experienced? And Angela, I'm going to start with you again here.
Sure. Some of the common misunderstandings, and employers on this session will, and maybe even some job seekers will recognize this, is one is that the sense that they might be overqualified. As a hiring manager myself, I don't really understand this. To me, I'd rather have as much qualifications as I can get so that I can get that knowledge from that candidate and that experience. But there is a concern that the person is overqualified and may become bored. And so as a job seeker, I think it's really important to acknowledge that and talk about why you're interested in the role, even if you're seemingly overqualified, because they're concerned about retention. They don't want to invest in you only to have you leave a year later because you're bored. And nine is that you may want too high of a salary. There's a lot of recruiters and employers who, when they're interviewing candidates, will ask what the salary expectations are. I'm personally on a mission to change that practice. My preference is that recruiters and hiring managers say, this is what the role pays. It pays X. Is that in line with your salary expectations, and would you like to continue as a candidate? Frankly, it's none of my business what you used to earn. What my business is what this role pays, and are you willing to accept it? And so this is my personal mission. Everybody who's a job, an employer on this call, please, please, please take my advice and don't ask for salary expectations. Just tell them what the role pays and let them self-select out if it's too low. Another misconception is that they may not be able to keep up with the pace and may not be able to learn new things. So a couple things on that. We recently went through an election in the United States, and this is not any political statement at all. This is about mature workers, because we had a couple of year-olds who were running for the role. And on Saturday, for any of you who saw the president-elect's speech, when he came out, he ran down that runway to get to the podium to speak. That was not an accident that he ran, that he jogged towards the podium. He was trying to show himself as somebody with vitality and energy for the job and for the task at hand. And when you compare that to some of the images they were showing of number 45 walking down that ramp very slowly and drinking water with two hands. Again, this is not a political statement. I don't care who you support. This is about how you present as a candidate, whether you present as having energy, being able to keep up with the pace, with the demands of the job, or whether you seem tired and too unable to keep up with it. And the last one about not being able to learn new things. Again, when Cheryl and Pat showed that slide that showed that 16% were willing to take new training and credentials, and I actually was dismayed that it said 16%, it should say 100%. Because if you don't have a growth mindset, if you're not willing to learn new things, then to Nicole's point, the employer will think that you cannot keep up with technological changes, with the pace of the job. And the reality is we do work differently today than we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I'm just going to give one more example before I turn it over to Nicole. And that is, if you need to see a doctor, you probably want a doctor with experience, right? But you don't want to go to the doctor that's been a doctor for 30 years and has never taken a course since graduating university. In other words, their medical knowledge is 30 years old. So what's the good of having a 30-year experienced doctor, but who only has the education of 1 year? And so what you want is you want to go to a doctor who's staying on top of the latest in medical research and what is happening. That's who you want, not the person who's been a medical doctor for 30 years but has never kept up to date with medical research. And I'd like to use that analogy for why it's important today and what the conceptions are. The candidate, you need to show that you actually can learn new things, that you adapt, and that you're aware of the environment and the advancements in technology and societal norms and all of that.
Excellent. And I just want to quickly, we just got a quick clarification here that the slide was 16% of mature workers are taking training, 71% are willing to take training. So again, there is that big difference. Yeah. But
Thanks,
Nicole, I know, yeah, thank you. I know you have also something to add to that, especially because throughout the project, and I think from those focus groups that I know you participated in, one of the resounding messages was seeing candidates as continuous learners as well. So I know you have a few things that you recognize that are maybe some misnomers for job seekers.
I think it's interesting. One of the things that people continuously bring up from a recruitment standpoint is that individuals, as they age, take more and more time off. So whether it be additional time off for vacation or additional time off due to sick leave, when you look at the studies, that's no longer the case. So individuals who are younger are looking for similar, if not even more, time off from a work-life balance perspective, and from a sick time perspective, individuals that are mature workers actually have one of the strongest rates essentially to show up in the workplace. Obviously, during a pandemic, the pendulum may be swinging perhaps a little bit too far, in the sense that those mature workers would in the past have actually come in, with a cold or not feeling well and felt, the requirement to continuously plug away and be present in their workplace. In a pandemic, they can't show up, but they definitely are the ones that are still turning on their Zoom cameras and attending, even if they're not feeling 100%, whereas some of the younger workforce are not willing to show up and do that added work during those timeframes. So I think that that's an interesting element for people to be aware of. I also think that a lot of individuals who are mature workers or recruiting mature workers are fearful of bringing them in for the fear that they're going to retire soon. And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions right now. If you look at younger workers who are in the workforce, you're averaging 2 to 2.5 years with any individual employer or in any individual job, whereas mature workers are more than content to stay and are really seeking a place at this point to kind of live out the remainder of their working years with the same employer and adjust as need be. And so I think you're looking at 5+ years for those mature workers when you're onboarding them versus the risk of kind of 2.5 years with those younger workers. So I think that that's a big misconception that, some employers are fearful of onboarding and really shouldn't be if that's one of the deciding factors.
Absolutely. I love that you bring up the fear of that they're going to exit sooner rather than later. And how we're finding mature workers are looking to perhaps work out the rest of their work life within an organization. And what an amazing opportunity for those individuals, retaining those individuals to mentor, whether it's mentoring the younger generations coming through the workforce, or the opportunity for them to continue learning with their peers, mentoring them or mentoring up to them as well. So, there's a real value in organizations to add productivity, innovation, collaboration by bringing in these experienced individuals. In some instances, to be able to say what doesn't work, not what necessarily does work, bring that experience in, and then help an organization and their teams become more productive and perhaps have some of that intellectual knowledge that 10, 15, 20 years, perhaps the technology has changed, but not necessarily the fundamentals of it. So that's a great point to bring up as well. There's just so many opportunities and so many value added items that a mature worker can bring to an organization. I know we could go on and on and on, but of course we have limited time this morning. So I want to shift a little bit here about what you would say is the most common assumption mature job seekers make when applying or interviewing for a job. And Nicole, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I think some of the Angela touched originally on, that sense of being overqualified, or perhaps already talking themselves out of a job because they are a mature worker. It is unfortunate. Through my recruiting over the last 15 years, I have found that mature worker, far more than any other demographic when recruiting, almost walks in with a preconceived notion that the job will not be theirs because of their age demographic or because of their perceived lack of skill. And for those individuals, if you've been granted that interview, essentially you are in a position to be talking yourself out of a job, not into the job. And so when you walk in with that weight on your shoulders, for lack of a better way of saying it, I fear that you're walking in and talking us out of hiring you versus hiring you. And I experience that, unfortunately, far more frequently than what I'd like to see.
Absolutely. So it goes back to how you're showing up as well, as Angela had said. Angela, what do you want to add to that?
I couldn't agree with Nicole anymore, and she took the words right out of my mouth, which is sometimes mature workers come in and they literally talk themselves. They convince us not to hire them. And part of that is even it's discouraging, right? When you're looking for a job, doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're a new grad or whether you're a mature worker or somewhere in between, typically you're going to get a lot of rejections before you get a job offer. It's very unusual to be offered the first job that you interview for. But I find that mature workers tend to take that as a personal statement about their age and come in feeling very defeated. You could see it in their slump of their shoulders. You could see it in their inflection in voice. You could see it in the energy with which they hold themselves and carry themselves. Remember, age is just a number. So the concern that some employers have is not whether you are old or older. It's whether you seem old, whether you act old, because you probably know yourself some very youthful looking or youthful seeming 60-year-olds and some very old seeming 60-year-olds. It's not the age, it's your vitality. And so to that, are you eating well? Are you sleeping properly? Are you exercising? Is your suit tailored or is it hanging off of you? I know right now we're doing video, so nobody's really seeing you above the waist anyway, but is your shirt looking good? And so going in with that sense of looking and feeling defeated, interviewers pick up on that energy. And I think that's Nicole's point too, is you pick up on that and you're like, I don't know if this person's going to fit with us because I need somebody who can keep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it really is the perception of how you show up. Your resume gets you through the door, but it's how you show up and present yourself that takes you to the end game. So in saying that, what advice would you have for job seekers in how to highlight their experience without looking dated or revealing their age? And Angela, I'm going to get you to start off on that one.
Sure. So if you have, as a job seeker, have no education beyond your high school or your first university throughout the years, I would recommend taking the years off. First of all, don't put high school on your resume ever, and then remove the years because that's what they'll do. And if you're taking additional courses, whether it's through your association, through continuing education, through Coursera, as I mentioned, or even seminars like this, add them to your resume so it varies a little bit and it shows that you've been doing things. Add those. I already doing the annual resume review and making sure that you're able to add one new thing every year, whether that's a new responsibility that's significant, a new skill, or a new accomplishment. And if you cannot do it, you are not staying current. And so you will not be ready should you need to transition. I know it's going to sound funny, but if you're using a Hotmail or an AOL email address, change it. And do not use something like sunny skies 28 at hotmail.com because it not only is unprofessional, but it does seem dated because it says this person doesn't really understand how to use technology in a professional manner. Make sure that you're active on LinkedIn. Post about things that you're expert in, stuff that's happening in your industry or your profession, stuff that's happening in your community. The more active you are on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's algorithm will pick up on that and rank you high in the search when a recruiter is through LinkedIn. And so it's not enough just to like people's posts, but post regularly. And I like to suggest to people at minimum, bare minimum, once a week, you really should be doing something 3 times a week, whether you're commenting on somebody else's post or whether you're posting on your own. And that will also help you seem current.
Excellent. We're coming up here on time. So Nicole, do you have a quick anything to add there?
Yeah, I think to hone in on the email address front, something that I see far too frequently as well is individuals who put their year of birth as part of their actual email address. So, Nicole B. We won't guess, but whatever that might be.
Getting mature.
But like in that category, and it's fascinating because otherwise I would have no idea how old that individual was when they walked in the door, be it vibrant or otherwise, but they've provided me with that. So that's something that we definitely want to avoid. And I think to look at or resume companies. So there's a great one here locally called Resume Restoration. They're quite young. They're new. They're actually starting to work with the CPHR directly. And they are a great online platform that will review your resume and make sure that it's very modern and updated. So it will pull the dates that they don't believe will be beneficial for a job that you're applying for. And they also will ensure that the algorithm for companies that are utilizing online software as their initial screening have like you have the appropriate keywords, you have removed all the keywords that may be something that automatically disqualifies you from going to that next level. So I do think more and more having assistance from an actual resume restoration company is proving to be beneficial to kind of get you through that first online software screening process.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. And you make such a great point about, just making sure your resume has clear and concise information to it. We're all of us are so proud of our accomplishments, but that we tend to sometimes want to put so much in. I'm going to take us to one more question. We've been talking for almost a half hour. Can you believe that? And I know we could talk for a longer time, but in the interest of getting to our networking session, I want to jump here and ask both of you, in what is your opinion of a mature worker's greatest asset? Angela, why don't you start us off?
Definitely, their greatest assets is that they have experience. They have a wisdom that comes with that experience. If they are emotional intelligence and they have self-awareness and can really present leadership skills, they can mentor other people. They can bring in perspectives from other industries or other countries, environments. And so they have a lot to offer. As long as they've stayed current and their skills are fresh.
Excellent. Thank you. And Nicole, what do you have there?
I think that age demographic lends itself really well, in addition to what Angela has said. They bring great consistency. So with their past experiences, they do that generation is known in the workplace to being very consistent, and also very loyal. So in a time frame right now where you're looking at a fair amount of turnover and turmoil in a lot of different industries, having that loyalty, I think, will start becoming far more of a leading element for a lot of companies as they continue to grow and shift.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Again, we've run out of time to have this great discussion. I want to thank you both for your participation today. Angela and Nicole, your advice and your insight and your expertise has been valuable, both for our employers and our job seekers and service providers that are in attendance today. So again, I want to thank you for being with us and taking your time out of your day, especially as Angela has joined us from a different time zone. I had to get a little bit earlier today for us. So we're going to move right into our networking session. We have about 15 minutes to do our quick networking, and then we're going to wrap it up and do some prizes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to look into the chat box. We are actually going to move from this specific platform to a Zoom platform for the networking session itself. We're going to put you into the breakout rooms, and in there you're going to have an opportunity to meet employers, job seekers, and service providers, and have a quick discussion. What we'd ask you to do is introduce yourself briefly, and then have a quick chat about the value of mature workers in the workplace, where you see the pros and cons are. And then from that Zoom platform, we are going to stay in that platform as we wrap up the rest of today's session. So the Zoom link is in the chat box, and we're going to give you a minute to click into the chat box to drag and grab the Zoom link. Once you're in the Zoom platform, you will be put into a breakout session. So please join your breakout session and have fun and get to meet some new people. Remember, this isn't a job fair, but an opportunity to network. So I encourage you to go to your Zoom link now to start the network process.